physically grab you, but they'll yell at you from afar and tell you to move away. And so this, again, this aspect of social distancing, we find was also prevalent in the time of Rasulullah in the contagious diseases that they faced with, whether it was leprosy or anything else. You know, the Prophet himself said, run away from the leper, the one who has a contagious ailment, as if you would run away from a lion. And it's funny because that's the exact reaction you now get from people. You accidentally come within 6 feet of a person, people will run from you as if you're a lion. They'll jump away in the opposite direction. And so this, again, is a, you know, I want to use the word beautiful, but it's scary, the world we're living in. But it's beautiful how you see people are now acting upon these teachings of Islam without knowing, because these are teachings of reality. You know, Islam is a religion that is a religion of reality, a religion of truth, and it says things that are just true in nature. And whether our scientists and researchers come up with those truths, whether Islam gives it to us, you know, it shows us that there is a complete, you know, they're completely in line and in accordance with each other. You know, there's another story from the life of Rasulullah, where a leprous man came to meet him, and he wanted to do bayt. He wanted to give the pledge of allegiance. And as he wanted to give the pledge of allegiance, he had to hold the hand of Rasulullah to give that pledge of allegiance. Yet Rasulullah stayed away from that person. He didn't grab his hand, and he sent a message to him that your bayt, your pledge of allegiance, has been accepted. Now you can go home, and you should stay home because that's better for you. You know, so again, beautifully we find how those contagious diseases at that time, the Prophet taught us through his actions and his teachings this beautiful guidance as to how we can deal with epidemics and pandemics even in our society. And these are the exact same measures we're taking. They had no technology in that time. There was no research, no labs, but these truths were evident even then. And these truths were taught to us by Rasulullah even then. That somebody's sick, somebody's contagious, you stay away from that person. You don't go close to that person, separate them, because that way you prevent yourself from getting the disease, you prevent other people from getting it, and you prevent that disease from spreading. This is what we call social distancing, has been mentioned in the hadith of Rasulullah. You know, and then moving forward, you know, you watch television, and even as you're in these stores, if you're doing grocery shopping, you hear these announcements, and you hear these ads on the radio, you see the commercials on television, and that sometimes you have to kind of do a double take and think, am I living in a movie? What's going on? You hear these announcements, and what are they saying? You know, they're saying, for your own safety, stay at home. Don't be here if you don't have to be here. Go home. Radio advertisers are saying, stay home, save lives. Commercials from CDC are continuously saying this. And every time you hear it, you know, you think, I must be living in a movie, but this is a reality that you should stay home if you're sick. Now, again, I've mentioned that there's some people who, and we had this discussion even yesterday. I was on an Ansarullah call. They had a similar forum going on, and this issue came up. Somebody asked the question that as Muslims living in America, you know, do we have to absolutely oblige by the government's guidance that they're giving us? They're giving us all this guidance to stay home and do this and do that. Do we have to go according to that, or as Muslims can we kind of be free to do our own thing? Now, number one, the answer to that, of course, is that as Muslims, we have to obey the government we're living in. We have to obey those guidelines. Hazur's point, in a very blanket way, said we should obey those guidelines. We have to act according to the way the government's telling us to act for our own betterment. Yet, you know, you will still have some people who will say, I don't need to do what the government says. I don't need to do any of these things. But then again, if such people are not going to listen to their government, they should at least listen to Rasulullah. You know, if you go to point 4, it's 2 slides later. In that hadith, the Prophet has told us that those who stay home to protect themselves and others remain under the protection of Allah. You know, it's a very eye-opening hadith that, you know, it may have had a different meaning before, but now in light of this pandemic, when any one of us could be inflicted with this disease and we don't even know, we could be asymptomatic carriers. But if we stay home to protect ourselves so we don't contract the disease, and it's also to protect other people so we don't spread it, Rasulullah says we will be under the protection of Allah. And so these people who are saying, and we've met all of these people, they're especially prevalent in some of our Eastern cultures, that we don't need to do what the government says, we can do whatever we want, it'll be fine, and it's blown out of proportion. If they don't want to listen to the government, that's fine. At least listen to Rasulullah. You know, when he says stay home to protect yourself and stay home to protect others, then Allah will protect you. And so this is especially relevant in today's pandemic, to stay home, and these commercials and these advertisements and these announcements spreading through our society to stay home. There's a reason for that. And we should listen to those announcements because they're completely in line with the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, the guidance that he's given us. that in these situations we should be staying in our homes and not leaving needlessly. Now, as we are going, about in the battle against this disease, there's different steps that these epidemiologists and virologists and infectious disease specialists are saying in terms of how to fight this disease. The first phase, was that our response was too little, too late. We closed borders too late. The lockdowns, the quarantines, they're all happening too late. The disease has spread way beyond comprehension already. But the hope is that with enough testing, and as we test enough people and figure out who's infected and who's not, rather than having a whole lockdown, many of our counties and states are on complete lockdown right now, where nobody can actually leave their home at the moment, whether you're sick or you're healthy. Now, the hope is that our testing goes to such a level that we can test so many people that we can now identify who are sick and identify who are healthy. And slowly we can let those people who are healthy out in society, get them to re-engage in the economy, re-engage in everyday activities. Healthy people can mingle amongst themselves with no danger, and those who are sick can be isolated and quarantined amongst themselves. And that way there's no danger of the disease spreading. And this is the hope that that's the next phase we can get to in the battle against this virus. Now, again, beautifully, we look at the teaching of Rasulullah. This is exactly how he's also taught us how we deal with contagious diseases. He has said that those people who have contagious diseases should be identified and kept away from those who are healthy. The healthy can mingle amongst themselves, and they won't spread any disease amongst themselves. And those who are sick should be isolated. They should be quarantined. This is the next step in our battle against this disease. And nowadays, there's an article the other day about how there was a tiger in the Bronx Zoo who contracted the virus. You're seeing reports of dogs and cats who are contracting the virus. This is spreading to animals as well. And as believers in not just Allah, but as believers in serving all creation, we should also be taking care of all creation at this time, humanity as well as animals. And Rasulullah has taught us that even with animals, this should be the case. That if there's cattle who are diseased, separate and quarantine them from the healthy cattle. And so this is the next step in how we should be battling this disease. The Prophet has said that the plague, the patient of the plague or the virus, who remains in his home with patience and expectation of reward, knowing that nothing will afflict him other than Allah's decree, will attain the reward of a martyr, of a shaheed. So again, this is a message to those people, and we all know those people who might be like, I'm strong enough, I can do it, I can leave my home, I can do whatever I want, and we've all met these kinds of people. This is what those people now need to hear from Rasulullah, that if you're afflicted with a contagious disease, rather than going out and spreading it to other people, remain in your home. Because and that's a very difficult thing. We're all finding it to be very difficult these days to be isolated, to stay in our home, to quarantine ourselves in our homes. It's very difficult to not go out and have our routine. It's a huge sacrifice on our parts. But the Prophet is saying is when you have been inflicted with this virus or with this disease or whatever illness there is, and you make that sacrifice to stay home and not spread that disease, you're saving people's lives. You are effectively actually not playing a part in saving the lives of people in society. And so when you're inflicted, even if you have the disease, even if your disease is terminal, but if you're playing your part and not being part of the chain and the contagiousness of that disease, then you will be a martyr in that way because you stayed home to save the lives of other people. And so this aspect of quarantining the sick, that now our CDC and WHO and all these organizations are saying that that's the next step. This again was taught to us by Rasulullah 1,400 years ago, to quarantine and separate those people who have a contagious illness against those who do not have. Now, aside from this, there are other measures that are being taken as well. I'm going to move to the final 2 or 3 points that we have. One is that we've seen as this virus has spread, it started in China, it started in Wuhan, and from there it spread through the rest of the world. Now, not wanting to go into a discussion on the politics of China and America and the cover-ups and this and that, those hashtags of China lied and people died, without going into any of that. The fact is that if early on this virus was identified while the outbreak was contained in Wuhan, and if it was identified there and a travel ban was placed over Wuhan, then this disease would have never spread anywhere else. It would have contained there, and there they could have isolated and quarantined the people who were sick, and it would have been completely killed right there. But the fact is, because there was no travel ban, because the response was late, it spread all over the world. It spread to UK, to Canada, USA, UK, Italy, Germany, Spain, everywhere. And now everywhere as it spread, after the fact, countries have implemented travel bans. Now USA's border is closed, Canada's borders have closed, UK's closed its borders. All these travel bans have been implemented, which is a good thing. But the fact is that now it's too little too late. Now they're saying even within the states, there's been talk of having interstate travel bans, of traveling from one state to another. Because as you travel from one state to another, you spread the disease from another place to another. And so when there's an outbreak in one place, either you stay there or you don't enter that place. So beautiful teaching of Rasulullah, and again, taught to us 1400 years ago. But if this was implemented even a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months ago, this outbreak would not have been what it is today. This outbreak, which was localized, would not have become a pandemic. Now, finally, moving on to the second last slide, a lot of us, and I had my own personal feelings regarding this issue a month and a half ago. I personally felt a month and a half ago that our mosques should remain open. No matter what happens, our prayers should happen, they should continue. And all of us had this very emotional sentiment regarding our mosques, that prayers should continue, that all of this should still be going on. Yet, when you look at it, however, from a very objective point of view, we have to realize what good is there in having a place of congregation. When that place of congregation, even if it's for a pious purpose of worshiping and praying, what good is it having that if that place now becomes a center of the spread of a disease, it becomes a center of the spread of a disease that can kill people? There's a joke going around social media that the Tablighi Jamaat in Pakistan, they continue to hold their prayers and their congregations. And the joke is that Tablighi Jamaat, whose express purpose is to spread Islam, they've spread more coronavirus and deaths through their actions than any kind of Islam anywhere in the world. And so this is a reality that Islam is a religion that is beautifully flexible. It says that when there's certain circumstances in which there's more negative or more harm for you, then Islam is flexible in the sense it won't make you do something that now can wreak havoc and can wreak death in society. The Prophet has beautifully said the entire earth is a masjid. Yes, we have places that are dedicated to be mosques. Yes, we should always populate those. And once this is done, we should continue repopulating our mosques. But the fact is, our prayers are such that they can happen even in your home. There's incidents from the life of Rasulullah. Hazur quoted this in his message. The week he did not give a sermon, the week he gave a message from his office, he quoted this. And this is in Sahih Bukhari, that there was a time in which there was so much rain and flooding that when the muezzin gave the azan, he was told to say, Sallu fi buyutikum, pray in your homes. And this was done during Hazrat Ibn Abbas's time, Raziyallahu anhu. And people looked at him like, what are you doing? And he said, I know it's Jummah, and Jummah is obligatory. But the fact is that I don't want to put you through that hardship. This was done by Rasulullah in the past, where he said, pray in your homes because of this. And so prayer can be done in homes in these kinds of situations and in these kinds of circumstances. And so, to have this emotional or sentimental argument that the mosque should remain open, this is actually incorrect. We find even Hazur does not share this sentiment. If the mosques in UK have closed down, if he sent an instruction to Canada saying close your mosque, if USA Jamaat has also decided that, for the betterment of our members, we should not have prayers occurring in our mosques at this time, then that is an emotional sentiment that is not worth hanging on to at the moment, because there's more destruction and potential for a negative effect in keeping our mosques open, people congregating, doing prayers beside each other, and half of us could be asymptomatic carriers. And so it's better in this day and age to remain in our homes and congregate with our families. There's a beautiful story, this is on the last slide, from the time of Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu anha, where a lady was performing tawaf around the Kaaba, and she was leprous. She had a contagious disease. Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu anha told her that you should go back home because it's better for you and for other people. Now again, this lady is doing tawaf around the Kaaba, the house of Allah. If any argument can be made that you should be allowed, they should be there, that the argument can be made that the tawaf should be allowed no matter what. But Hazrat Umar, the Khalifa, said, no, go home, it's better for you, you shouldn't be doing this right now. She went home. And after Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu anhu died, people told her, he's gone, you can do it now. And she said, no, I'm not going to obey him when he's alive and disobey him when he's gone. And so this is the example we find of how we deal with these kinds of pandemics and epidemics and outbreaks in our society, that even then, even if mosques should be closed, then if they have to be closed, then they should be closed in that time. Then congregations should be stopped. Congregations that occur in our homes and within each other, in our isolations, in our quarantines. And this is the way in which even Islam has encouraged us, that we should fight against this virus. that we should fight this war or this battle against this epidemic and try to contain it as much as we possibly can. So in essence, these are the main points that I had in regards to how Islam teaches us to fight against this virus. I did want to make it a little more interactive during it. That was my original idea, but I think maybe I should have, instead of asking Najibai, who had no idea what the presentation was, I should have handled it myself, and that way I could have stopped where I needed to. But that's okay. I think we have 20 minutes left, and in these 20 minutes, we can go towards any questions that any of you may have.
So anybody has any questions, raise your hand. My apologies on the slide. That was, I never knew.
It's not your fault. That's my fault completely. So don't worry about that.
No big deal. I should take it. So we can take questions now. Anybody has any questions, you can either send them in the chat box or raise your hand and ask. If you have any comments related to the topic, I think that's fine too, right, Murphy? So you can click manage participant and raise your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want me to do that? Okay. I'll do it. Yeah, that's fine. I'll do it. Manage participants. Okay, so is there a cloud with a red dot? That's the raise hand sign?
I was telling the participants to raise their hand and then I'll unmute them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
So I see Ikan Ahmed Saeed has his hand raised, so I'm going to unmute you. Ikan bhai.
My question is, how is a masjid a home? How is a masjid a home?
I think the point, Jazakallah for your question, what I was trying to say was your home can be a masjid. The masjid can be a home maybe sometimes for people who live there. Some missionaries live in masjids in that way, but your home can be a masjid because the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that the entire earth is a masjid. He said, "Ju'ilat liyal ardu masjidan." The entire earth, except for the bathroom and graveyards and things like that, they can't be a mosque. But he said the entire earth is a mosque. Now you live in the earth, right? You live in the earth, you have your home. And so anywhere where you pray, that becomes a masjid for you. What does the word masjid mean? Masjid means a place and a time of prostration or prayer. And so when you've set aside in your home an area in which you're going to pray, and you pray there regularly, and that's your area of prayer, then even though it may not be called a masjid in the sense that it has a dome and a minaret and a separate building, but in your home, that can be the masjid in your home that you've now established where you pray. And so in that way, your home can become a mosque, especially in these days. It's important to establish a mosque in all of our homes.
Jazakallah, Rabbi Saab. So next we'll come to a question from Mutahar Farooq. Mutahar, I'm going to unmute you.
All right. So my question is, what happens if a person decides, if they know they have the virus and they decide to spread it around to others?
So what happens in what way, in what aspect? I mean, if you can clarify, that would help me answering the question.
Oh, so I was saying that if someone knowingly spreads the virus, is it any sins or punishments for them in a really bad way or something?
Okay. So in a spiritual way, of course, physically spreading the virus, you're just going to get more people sick, but spiritually speaking as well, of course, we would consider that an act of sin. I presented a few hadiths of Rasulullah where he has actually mentioned that when you stay home to protect yourself and others, you're under the protection of Allah. Now, when you are willingly going out and you're sick, and you're spreading that virus and you're willingly getting other people sick, then of course this is a direct disobedience of the commands of the Holy Prophet. This is a direct disobedience of the hadith that says that a Muslim is such a person from whom other people are safe from their hands and their tongue. And if you're going and harming people willingly, then this is very clearly a sin. Unwittingly is a different thing. Those are accidents, mistakes we make, and we should do istighfar for those. But willingly, of course, it definitely is a sin. When the Prophet has said, that the patient of the plague or of a contagious disease who remains in his home, and he's saying he remains in his home because when you go out, you're going to spread that disease. If you remain in your home, then Allah will give you the rank of a martyr. That shows us that there's a virtue in staying in your home if you have a disease. And if there's virtue in doing that, that means that there is sin in going out when you have the disease and spreading that disease, because now you're harming more people and you're causing the loss of more lives. And again, as the Quran says, causing a loss of lives, you take one life, it's as if you take all of humanity.
Jazakallah. So next we'll come to a question from Farhan. Farhan, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, so I had a question. So why don't we just go to the mosque, but we have we wear masks and stuff? Because if we're gonna go in public with masks, like it's not really that different if we're going in the mosque with masks.
Yeah. So it's a very good question that you have. Why can't we just go to the mosque with masks? Because even if you go with masks, there still always is a chance you're increasing the risk of being infected. Even going in a public, they're saying you should not go into public. You shouldn't be going to any of these places unless you absolutely have to. And if you absolutely have to, then wear a mask. So even our government agencies and organizations, WHO, CDC, they're not saying wear a mask and go in public and you'll be all good. It's all fine. You can go do whatever you want. They're saying the first step is stay home. That's the best defense you have. And if you have to go, if you have to go and get something to eat, you have to go and see a doctor, you have some urgent, essential work to do, then you should wear a mask to prevent your disease, if you have it, from it spreading to other people. But even then, because your hands are there, right? And your hands are there, you may be putting your mask on and off, there still is a chance of you getting the disease. You go to the mosque, and if you're doing all the prayers, you're within, and again, we can't even do social distancing in the mosque, right? Because you have to be, for social distancing, you have to be 6 feet away from the next person. When you're in the mosque and you're praying, you're standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder with these people. You can't do prayer 6 feet apart. That's just not congregational prayer. And so when you're standing with each other that close, and your hands are touching the ground, and let's say you forget to wash your hands and you take your mask off when you get home, if your hands have the virus, you're infecting yourself. So that danger, the potential of that danger is always going to be there. Even with the mask, it's there. So the mask is just an additional precaution to take if you have to go into public. But if you don't have to go, you shouldn't go. Even if it's to the mosque or to the store, anything, you shouldn't go. Stay home, do whatever you can at home, and only leave for absolute essential necessities. And if you do, then make sure you wear a mask.
Jazakallah, Rabbi Saab. So next we'll come to a question from Zadik Khan Saab. Zadik Bhai, I'm going to unmute you.
Yasakum, Rabbi Saab. Jazakallah for putting this together. It's a great presentation. I was going to ask, alhamdulillah, we've been able to stay connected, with these Zoom sessions, and, we have, alhamdulillah, MTA to keep us connected with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih. But, maybe just if you could talk about in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and then in the time of Rasulullah Kareem ﷺ, like what were some other ways that, Muslims and then later on Ahmadis, stayed connected, as they went through, either pandemics or plagues or other sort of events where people were forced to sort of stay indoors, beyond, the technology we're blessed with today. What are maybe some other ways that you think, based on the history of Ahmadiyya, history of Islam, that Muslims and Ahmadis can stay connected?
When we go through history and you look at different, in Rasulullah's time, and when these contagious diseases were there, even leprosy was there, there was a very good understanding of quarantining the infected people, isolating them. And so there was never such a situation in his time where there had to be such a widespread disease or illness that where everybody had to be quarantined in their homes or everybody had to go on lockdown. The disease or virus of coronavirus is a little, strange in the sense that because of its pandemic nature, because of the sense that there's asymptomatic carriers, because of the sense that even regular influenza, usually by the time you have symptoms, or usually when you're in the stage of being able to transmit the disease to other people, that time period isn't that great. But with coronavirus, that time period is very big in the sense that you have no symptoms yet you can transmit the disease, and that's what makes it so different from other diseases. And so as I've been reading about this as well, we find that that's a peculiar thing with this disease, and we have not seen a disease like this. Yes, Spanish influenza was a lot more harmful in terms of its death rate. It killed a lot more people. But in terms of the sneaky way that this one is contagious, this disease's actual fatality rate isn't that great compared to other diseases. It's 1 to 2%, maybe some countries are saying up to 10%, depends on how you measure it. But its fatality rate isn't that bad. What's so strange about this disease is how quickly it's infecting large amounts of people, mass amounts of people. And so in that situation, because everyone's on lockdown, this is a unique situation that even in Hazrat Masih Maud's time, during the spread of the plague, the Dawoon in India, people, yes, went on a certain level of lockdown in their homes. Yet it wasn't to the level that we have today. We find even at that time, Hazrat Masih Maud was still meeting Ahmadis who were taking precautions. We find that there was still a level of communal behavior that is different from today. And that may be because this disease has a specific aspect of being highly contagious in asymptomatic people for up to 2 weeks. And that's something that, as far as I've read, other diseases have not. Maybe if somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've read is that no other disease really, or too many, have shown this level of contagiousness before becoming symptomatic. And so we find in the past there was still different ways of remaining in touch. There was still different ways, whether it was, even if it was phone calls or letter writing, even once in a while in-person meetings were happening with people who were healthy. And even in the beginning with coronavirus, they were saying if you don't have symptoms, you're okay. If you don't have symptoms, you can go into public. You don't need to isolate yourself. Now they're saying everyone, because we don't know who has a disease and who doesn't. So with previous diseases, it was kind of clear as to who has symptoms, who doesn't, who's contagious, who's not. So that level of lockdown has never really been implemented in the past, as far as I'm aware. Even in 1918 with the Spanish flu, it wasn't as, it was worse, the fatality, but the contagiousness, the lockdown wasn't as bad as it is today in terms of social isolation and complete boycott of meeting another person.
Jazakallah, Rabbi Sahab. So next we'll come to Salam Bhatti. Salam Bhai, I'm going to unmute you.
Assalamu alaikum, Rabbi Sahab.
Wa alaikum salam.
So Ramadan is around the corner. Eid comes very soon afterwards. How can we best take advantage of Ramadan while we're self-isolating? Will we all essentially be in a form of itikaf? And then if we're still self-isolating during Eid, what will that look like?
So, this, I'm looking at it as an opportunity, Ramadan coming up. Of course, a huge part of Ramadan is our communal aspect. The daras in the masjid, the tarawihs together, the iftari, and a lot of spirituality is gained from that. Every year when you do this on a daily basis, it really gives you a spiritual boost to meet believers and to congregate and speak about the Quran, learn and teach each other. It's a very beautiful thing that we see happening in Ramadan. Yet at the same time, we find, Sufia have said that there's 3 principles of spiritual progression. One is eating less, one is sleeping less, one is talking less. And we find that in Ramadan, all of these 3 are inherently there. You eat less because you're fasting. You talk less because there is a level of less socialization in Ramadan. Even if we're at the masjid for iftaris and whatnot, we shouldn't be doing gupshup and random things, talking about sports. We should be, speaking about spiritual things. And even sleeping less. There's an aspect in Ramadan, we focus more on our tahajjud. Now this year in Ramadan, we're going to be forced to at least take part in the speaking less and the less socialization. And yes, although we will miss the communal aspect of Ramadan, being in a masjid, praying together, that will be a huge, I think, challenge to overcome in Ramadan. But at the same time, let's look at it as an opportunity that this will give us a beautiful opportunity to focus on our tahajjud in isolation, focus on our worship in isolation. Because when we look at the lives of prophets and saints, we find it's after a period of isolation through which they achieve such a status that Allah commissions them for prophethood. You look at Hazrat Buddha alayhi salam, it was years he spent meditating under the Bodhi tree, completely alone in isolation, after which he reached the status of nirvana. That's when he came to the point where he achieved peace. You look at Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, and there were times of his life, the Bible calls it for the temptation of in the desert by the devil. We look at it in the sense that he went through a spiritual exercise where he isolated himself for 40 days, fasting, praying. Then he achieved a spiritual level. Same with Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. The Quran says that he spent years in living in exile in Midian. Then ثُمَّ جِئْتَ عَلَىٰ قَدْرٍ يَا Musa. Then you came to the standard Moses, because he lived in exile and isolation. Even with the Rasulullah spent years praying alone in cave Hira, completely isolated, quarantined from society. That's when Hazrat Jibreel came to him and said, "Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq." Look at Hazrat Masih Maud spent his entire youth in the masjid, praying, isolating, reading, studying. Even his the prophecy of Muslim, it came after 40 days of complete isolation, prayer, meditation, and fasting. And it was that led to the great prophecy of Hazrat Muslim radhiyallahu anhu. And so there's a great benefit to be derived from isolation, and we should look at it as an opportunity to achieve great leaps in spirituality by going through this exercise. So it's something to actually be a little excited about as well, that we're being given. Allah's throwing us into a cave Hira right now. Every Ramadan we say this Ramadan it's taking on a brand new meaning. Even itikaf, of course, for men we should do it in the mosque. But now we may be forced to do itikaf at home. And in this time, that forced itikaf, let's take that to our spiritual advantage. And there's no telling what spiritual heights we can now achieve being forced into this and making the best out of this bad situation. Now, regarding Eid, that's a very interesting question. I'm not, that's part of me still hoping and praying that by Eid at least we can contain the virus enough to a point that maybe we can be allowed to have small gatherings by Eid. I don't know. It looks like it probably won't. But in that situation, then we will wait for guidance from Khalifatul Masih as to what we should do. I don't have an answer for you right now. But that is something interesting that I probably should look into in terms of at least what happened during as a Muslim time and Spanish influenza. Because at that time there were similar lockdowns, but I don't remember what actually they did. So we would wait for guidance from Azur to see, what we should do for Eid if we're still in this situation where we cannot congregate or meet each other or be at the mosque or be in hall. So that's something interesting that I guess we'll find out in the next few weeks.
So now we'll come to a few written questions as well. The first question asks about, there have been some policies and suggestions about keeping your throat hydrated during the quarantines or during COVID-19. The question is in regards to Ramadan. How can the two be balanced?
Drink enough water in the morning and drink enough water in the evening. I understand that that precaution is there. And even Hazur mentioned it in his sermon a number of weeks ago, that drink a lot of water. Now, I highly doubt that Hazur will say this year Ramadan is cancelled or don't fast because of this. I think our fasting will continue. And we can't change, our fiqh will not allow us to change the form of fasting. It's not going to say, yeah, you can fast, but then you can drink water during the day. The fasting, we have to oblige by what the rule and what fiqh says fasting should be. But then that just means we now need to strengthen every other preventative effort we can in terms of protecting ourselves. That means even being more precautious in terms of masks and sanitizing hands and washing hands and not leaving the house. In every other way, we should increase our precautions. But I don't think we should sacrifice our fasting, which is a core tenet of Islam. It's one of the pillars of Islam, and that I don't believe would be forgiven in terms of let's just not fast or bend the rules of fasting. Those rules will stay the same. Just be more careful in every other which way. And in all honesty, without joking, maybe drink a bit more water in the morning, maybe drink a bit more water in the evening. And with these precautions and with prayer, inshallah, we can just hold out hope that Allah will protect us and that we will achieve the benefits of Ramadan as well.
Another question that comes up is in regards to someone who is in search of faith. They're asking how they should use this Ramadan, and maybe it's similar to the last question. The question asks about somebody who's questioning their faith or in search of faith. How should they use this Ramadan to best serve that purpose?
Again, that question is related to the other question, so I'm not going to rehash that same answer. But there was a similar question yesterday in the Ansarullah session I had, where it was, how do you find God in an ungodly society? And I fully believe that it's in these kinds of situations which are the perfect opportunities to find God. It's in these moments when there is despair, when there is hopelessness, when there maybe is ungodliness in society, when you're forced into isolation, that's when God reveals himself in the most beautiful way. There's a reason why prophets found God in those moments, in ungodly societies, in societies where they were forcing themselves into isolation. I went through all of those examples. That's when they found God. And so this is now the perfect opportunity to find your faith, to actually fall into sajda and be a seeker. When we speak about finding faith and finding God and existence of God, there's two different ways of going about it. One is the intellectual way. Intellectually, you'll never be able to satisfy yourself and say, yes, God exists. Intellectually, you can come to a point and say, yeah, maybe a God should exist. But in order to find God, you have to move away from the intellectualism and move more into the seeking and satisfying your heart's desire, in the seeking to find Allah, seeking to find this being that exists. And so this is now the opportunity in an imposed isolation, in a society that we may call in terms of morality ungodly, to now fall into sajda, fall into whatever way you want to supplicate to that being and seek that being, look for the signs. And it's in this kind of situation where we find prophets found God, and it's this kind of situation where hopefully we ourselves can also re-find our faith and re-find our God, because this is where Allah shows his most beautiful manifestation to his people who seek him and truly seek him.
Jazakallah Rabbi Sab. So next we'll come to a question from Hashim Mumtaz, Kaita Bashkar. Hashim, I'm going to unmute you.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah Rabbi Sab for a very vigorous and very interesting presentation. And Jazakallah Modin Sab for managing this really, really well. So my question is, some people, I know it's just a little bit anti-intelligence, but they try to say things like, oh, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never used soap. He always washed with water, and that's why we just wash with water 3 times, and that's good enough. So do you want to speak to that a little bit? Is there any example from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time that he used whatever technology was available at that time for adequate cleaning? Jazakallah.
Yeah, these kinds of examples that the Prophet never used soap, so why do we have to use soap? I mean, we have to be real with ourselves. The Prophet didn't use soap. Was soap in existence there? Was it available? Was it ubiquitous? All of these issues have to be looked at. The fact is that if it was available, you cannot also say with any kind of certainty that he would not have used it, because he did use every means available to him at that time. The same argument is made, and it's a very side discussion regarding our mosques and the segregation we have in our mosques. We divide male and female with a wall. And they say this wasn't there at the Prophet's time. But the reality is they were segregated in the mosque front and back. And later on, if that technology was there, the wall would have been put. The wall was put by later Khulafa as well. And so we find that when the spirit and the essence of something is there, when even, I know it's a side discussion, but the spirit and essence of segregation is there, now we put walls in for ease. In the same way when the spirit and essence of cleanliness is there, that Rasulullah taught us and practiced, then if there's a way to practice that today that enhances it, then there's no harm in using it. We look at, and again, the best, for an Ahmadi Muslim, the best answer to this is, what is the example of Masimud and Khulafa? An example of Masimud and Khulafa is that they all use soap. Hazur uses soap. Anyone who spent any time near Khilafah knows our Khulafa use soap and shampoos and all of these things like normal human beings. So when they are the example here for us, they are showing us today, at least as a Muslim, that if Rasulullah was alive in this time, what would he have done with the technology we have today? And these are the things that they're doing. As a Muslim wrote books, where did the Prophet write a book? The Quran was revealed, he never wrote a book, so we can also make the same objection that the Prophet never wrote books, why is a Muslim writing books? So he wrote books because that now is a medium through which you can spread knowledge. And he used that medium. Jamaat is now using social media. Yes, as a Muslim, the Rasulullah never used Twitter. But now the Jamaat has Twitter accounts to spread the message of Islam and Ahmadiyyat, because that's what it requires. If they used every medium that was available to them to spread Islam and Ahmadiyyat. So when the spirit and essence of a teaching is there, cleanliness is there, and we know it's a huge part of Islam, when we have a medium through which we can increase our cleanliness, then to walk away from it, in fact, is just foolishness. It's the stupidity of the highest degree. In fact, that's something that we can say with certainty would be frowned upon by these pious men, by Rasulullah, by Muslims, because we have an avenue there in which we can increase and improve our health. So this is it's a false argument made by some people who like to stick to these pure, you can say purist kind of people who like to stick to certain things, but that's something that in fact holds no reality in terms of the argument of what the essence of our teachings actually are.
Jazakallah. And Murabi Saab, the questions seem to keep flooding in via the chat box, but I think we'll try to keep to our time of 8 o'clock cutoff, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
So first I want to say Jazakallah to the Tarbiyyat team and Murabi Saab for taking the time out. It was an amazing session, alhamdulillah. People on the MK Connect's Telegram chat are asking if the presentation can be shared later, so we can maybe share that.
Yeah, inshallah. Jazakallah for giving the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay, Jazakallah. So I just want to make a couple quick announcements in regards to the next presentation. So a much anticipated Sayyid Jasmani presentation is coming up in an hour. It's a live workout, 30-minute workout circuit, and it's a challenge. We're going to call it the MK Fit Challenge. Are you MK Fit? So go ahead, everybody. I'm really requesting everybody to come, get your sweat on, come wear some track pants, t-shirt, and inshallah we'll see if you're up to the challenge. So that session will start at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Again, this next hour, we're recommending that everybody should use it to complete their Maghrib Salat and go ahead and eat dinner, whatever you need to do. And please join back by 9 p.m. Eastern time for the next session. So Jazakallah again, Rabbi Saab, for taking the time out. Alhamdulillah, amazing session.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Okay, take it. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.